Why do teams that are described as empowered still feel the need to ask permission before making meaningful decisions?
Yeah, I mean, that is really the defining organizational puzzle of our time, isn't it?
It really is.
You look around and you have these incredibly capable, highly compensated professionals, and they are essentially stuck. They're in this corporate holding pattern, just waiting for a green light to do the jobs they were hired to do.
Right? I want you, the listener, to picture this because, well, you have probably lived it. Imagine you're sitting in a Tuesday afternoon planning meeting.
Oh, we've all been there.
Exactly. And your official title might be like Agile Squad Lead or Product Owner. And the posters on the wall in your office talk about autonomy, being product-led, moving fast.
Right, usual buzzwords.
Yeah, the internal newsletters are just full of phrases like fail fast and own the outcome. But then to change a minor feature scope or push back a non-critical deadline based on new customer data that you literally just gathered, you can't just do it.
No, you have to submit a formal request.
Right. You have to wait 2 weeks for a steering committee to meet, and you just hope a vice president who has, never even met your customers gives you the thumbs up. So you have the label of empowerment, but the daily reality is just this maze of permission slips.
It's totally paralyzing.
It is. And before we get too deep, I need to mention that the source material for this episode comes from an upcoming body of work around harmony by the author Matthew Coxall, who we will refer to as Matt for the rest of this podcast.
And our mission for this deep dive really is to use Matt's work to unpack the mechanics of that maze. We are going to explore why this persistent habit of permission seeking, why it isn't a sign of weak or timid or unmotivated teams.
Because it's so easy to just blame the people, right?
Exactly. We need to stop diagnosing this as a failure of individual courage. Instead, we're going to look at how waiting for permission is actually a perfectly rational, learned response to a contradictory organizational system.
A learned response. I like that.
Yeah. And we'll explore how we move from what is essentially empowerment theater to genuine, usable authority.
I want to pull on that thread right away. Empowerment theater. Because it really does feel like a performance a lot of the time.
It absolutely is a performance.
There is this massive, just undeniable gap between the stated reality, the slides they present at the all-hands meeting, and the lived reality of the people actually writing the code or designing the campaigns or building the products.
And that gap exists because organizations, well, they frequently engage in half measures. They delegate the accountability for a specific outcome. So let's say they want a team to increase user adoption by 20%.
Right, a classic target.
Or maybe they want to hit a new regional revenue target. They hand down that outcome, but they do not redesign the authority or the funding models or the governance structures around that outcome.
So the system stays the exact same.
Exactly. They just change the labels on the org chart.
Yeah.
So they might rename a traditional IT delivery group into an empowered product squad.
Yeah.
But the operating reality, the actual mechanisms of how work gets funded and approved, that hasn't shifted an inch.
Wow, okay. So the team gets a shiny new mandate, but the moment they try to act on it, they hit a wall.
A massive wall.
Let's say they're looking at the backlog and they realize, based on, a new market trend, that feature A is totally useless and they need to pivot to feature B.
Which happens all the time.
Right. And in a truly empowered state, they just make the call. But in this state of empowerment theater, they can't do that. They have to escalate that pivot to a committee.
Yeah, they cannot pivot without permission. They cannot protect their own technical health if it means, slowing down a promised delivery date.
Even if the code is a mess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They can't say no to a senior stakeholder's pet project, even if that project doesn't align at all with the outcome they were told to own. And perhaps most critically, they cannot act on new learning.
Which totally defeats the purpose of being agile.
Exactly. This is an anti-pattern that Matt's work refers to as empowerment without authority. The team owns the backlog in name, but they do not own the strategic trade-offs that actually shape that backlog.
So they're just managing the tasks, basically.
Right. They might be measured on customer satisfaction, but they lack the access to support insights, or they lack the actual authority to pause feature development to fix the underlying technical debt that is causing the dissatisfaction in the first place.
Wait, I need to process this because there's a paradox here to me. If an organization hands you a target and says, you are accountable for hitting this revenue goal, isn't that the same thing as empowering you?
It seems like it would be, right?
Yeah, like if you have the target, shouldn't you naturally take the reins? If you own the target, it implies you have the reins. Why wouldn't a team just grab those reins and start making the trade-offs?
Because accountability without influence is just exposure.
Oh, exposure. Wow, okay. That completely changes the paradigm.
It really does.
You are saying that without the structural levers to make decisions, a target isn't a goal, it's a liability.
It is a profound liability for the people doing the work. If a team can only control their local activity, right, the daily coding, the wireframing, the task execution.
The day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, the day-to-day. But if they cannot control the major decisions that dictate the product's direction, they're caught between two completely conflicting worlds.
They're trapped.
Totally. The organization expects them to act like these visionary product owners who can creatively solve complex customer problems, but the system constrains them, exactly like a traditional delivery unit whose only job is to execute a pre-written project plan on a fixed timeline.
So they have all the pressure, but none of the power.
Exactly. They carry the burden of the outcome, but none of the levers to affect it. So of course they freeze. Of course they ask for permission. What else would they do?
That makes total sense. So if simply handing out a target and walking away isn't empowerment, then we need to fundamentally redefine what empowerment actually requires.
We do. We have to look at the structural prerequisites.
Right, because if we don't know what actual empowerment looks like structurally, we can't begin to fix the friction. So what are the actual requirements for a team to operate with autonomy?
Well, the foundation requirement is what we term usable authority. And usable authority is not about just, leaving a team alone in a room and hoping for the best.
Right, it's not anarchy.
No, not at all. It requires specific, active ingredients.
Right.
So, clear strategic intent from leadership, shared context across the team, meaningful outcome ownership, and crucially, access to timely expertise.
Timely expertise. Okay, I want to challenge this because in my experience, bringing enabling functions like legal or compliance or marketing into the room early, it often feels like the exact opposite of empowerment.
No, so?
Well, if I'm trying to ideate and move fast and I have a compliance officer sitting in every single brainstorming session, nothing gets built. They just see risk everywhere. Doesn't early collaboration just lead to early paralysis?
That is a very common concern, and it happens when enabling functions operate as auditors rather than co-designers.
Oh, auditors. Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like.
Right. In a traditional setup, legal or compliance arise at the very end of the line. The team has spent, say, 6 months building something, and 2 days before launch, compliance reviews it, finds a regulatory issue, and blocks the release.
Which is incredibly frustrating.
That is late-stage friction. When we talk about timely expertise, we mean shifting those functions to the beginning, but with a completely different mandate.
So they're not there to play cop.
Exactly. Their job is not to say no to the idea. Their job is to help the team define the safe boundaries of the experiment. They're there to shape the work safely, identifying those regulatory or brand guardrails so the team can run as fast as they want within those guardrails.
Okay, let me see if I can map this to an analogy. It sounds like giving someone the keys to a car and telling them they are an empowered driver, right? You are fully accountable for getting us to our destination.
I like this. Keep going.
But they are treating the team like they are driving a train on fixed tracks. Management laid down the tracks a year ago, they control the switches, and the team's only real job is to just shovel coal into the engine to keep the speed up.
Yes, that is new.
But the team was told they were getting an off-road vehicle where they could choose the best route based on the terrain, and they haven't been given a map, the steering wheel is locked, and they have to call headquarters every time they want to change lanes.
That captures the friction perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
You are told you have an off-road vehicle, but the organization is still actively laying down train tracks in front of you and then, wondering why you aren't adapting to the landscape.
Right. It's totally unfair to the team.
And that brings us to the vital role of boundaries. Because autonomy is not the absence of constraints. In fact, autonomy is strengthened by clear boundaries.
That still sounds a bit contradictory to people who associate autonomy with, total freedom. How do constraints actually strengthen freedom?
Well, think about your off-road vehicle. If you were driving across an open desert in the pitch black, and you know there are massive ravines somewhere out there, how fast are you going to drive?
I mean, I'm crawling. 5 miles an hour, maybe less. I don't want to fall in.
Right. You are crawling, and you are constantly asking the passenger to get out with a flashlight to check the path ahead. You're asking for permission to move forward safely.
Oh, I see where this is going.
But if you have a GPS and headlights and clear markers showing exactly where the edge of the ravine is, you can confidently drive 60 miles an hour.
Because you know where it's safe to go.
Exactly. When boundaries, whether they're regulatory rules, architectural standards, or financial limits, when those are explicit and stable, teams know the exact space they can safely explore without needing repeated approval.
So it creates like a safe zone.
It creates safe freedom rather than hidden control. Leaders establish these boundaries not by micromanaging the exact path the team takes, but by clearly defining the constraints of the terrain.
Okay, so we've just established that usable authority and clear guardrails are the logical requirements for a team to move fast. But we know that in reality, many incredibly smart, highly paid teams who seem to have these things, they still default to waiting.
They do, all the time.
If the logic is so clear, what is the system quietly teaching them? Like, why do they still wait for permission? Why is waiting the rational choice?
Because human behavior in complex systems, it's driven by consequences, not by corporate messaging.
Ah.
Not the posters on the wall.
Not the posters. Waiting for permission is a highly rational, learned response to the organization's signals. Teams learn the real rules of the organization based on what happens after they make a decision, not what is written in a glossy strategy deck.
It's operant conditioning, basically.
Exactly.
If you, the listener, step out of line and try to exercise your autonomy, and you get burned for it, you are not going to step out of line again. The poster on the wall loses all credibility instantly.
It does, completely.
So how exactly does the corporate system condition people to be cautious? What are the specific signals? It happens through very specific repetitive signals. And the most damaging signal is when decisions are reversed.
Reversed, like overridden.
Yes. Let's say a team looks at their customer data. They exercise their supposed autonomy. And they make a local decision to delay a minor feature release, to prioritize a critical security patch.
Which sounds like a responsible product decision.
Right. But if a senior leader swoops in, overrides that decision, and demands the feature be released on time anyway, the team learns an immediate lesson. They learn their autonomy is conditional.
Conditional autonomy. You are fully empowered right up until the moment we mildly disagree with your choice.
Yes. And the second time that situation arises, they won't even bother analyzing the data. They will just ask the leader what to do.
Why do the work if it's just going to be thrown out?
Exactly. Another powerful signal is shifting boundaries. We just talked about how stable boundaries create safe freedom. But what happens when the rules of the game change depending on the context?
Or the political climate in the office.
Or just the mood of a stakeholder on a given Tuesday.
Right. The boundaries become invisible fences. You don't know where the shock is going to come from.
And if you don't know where the boundary is today, the most rational, self-preserving action is to ask for permission. You wait for reassurance rather than risk stepping out of line.
That makes total sense. You're just trying not to get electrocuted by the invisible fence.
Exactly. A third signal involves how organizations treat roadmaps. In a healthy environment, a roadmap is a series of hypotheses to be tested.
Yeses, essentially. Educated guesses.
Right. But often, roadmaps become fixed commitments.
Oh, I see this constantly. A team does 3 months of deep discovery work. They talk to users, and they realize the feature they promised the board 6 months ago is actually not going to solve the customer's problem at all.
And what happened?
The roadmap is treated like a blood oath. They have to build it anyway.
Exactly. When roadmaps are treated as fixed promises rather than hypotheses, the system is actively teaching the team that adapting to new evidence is punishable. They learn that delivering the flawed plan on time is organizationally safer and more valued than delivering actual value.
That is so backward, but so common. What's the fourth signal?
The fourth signal is when consultation is confused with approval.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, a team might approach, say, an enterprise architect or a security lead simply to ask for advice on shaping a solution. They just want some informal guidance.
Just a quick sanity check.
Right. But if that informal advice-seeking conversation suddenly morphs into a mandatory multi-week sign-off gate,
Oh, man.
the team learns to hide their work. They will wait until the product is entirely finished before showing it to anyone, or they just stop seeking early advice altogether.
Because asking for help just slows them down. Every time they try to operate like the off-road vehicle they were told they are, they hit a newly laid piece of train track.
They do?
And eventually, they just accept that they are a train. They stop trying to steer and they start escalating.
And we have to look closely at the psychology of that escalation. Permission seeking becomes a mechanism to distribute organizational risk.
To spread the blame, basically.
Yes. If a team knows they will carry the downside of a decision, if they know they will be blamed if an experiment fails or a metric drops, but they do not have the structural protection or authority to defend their rationale, they will logically seek approval.
They want a senior leader's fingerprints on the decision.
Exactly. Approval simply becomes a quest for cover. If the VP signed off on it, the VP shares the blame.
They are looking for an umbrella because the system has taught them it is going to rain. That makes complete sense.
It really does.
But I want to take this out of the abstract. Let's ground this. Let's look at a concrete pattern. I want you to walk us through a scenario where this learned helplessness actually plays out.
Sure.
Not because people are malicious or incompetent, but because well-intentioned professionals are just trying to navigate these conflicting mandates.
Let's examine a very recognizable pattern Matt calls the decision latency scenario.
Okay, set the scene for us.
Imagine a large product organization, and they're responsible for a major digital commerce platform. You have two critical functions involved in this scenario, marketing and engineering.
Oh boy, already a classic pairing. I can feel the friction brewing.
Right. So marketing has analyzed the market, and they've identified a major promotional campaign that is absolutely vital for hitting a critical quarterly revenue target.
Okay, big stakes.
The board is expecting this revenue, and marketing needs to launch the campaign in 2 weeks. At the exact same time, engineering has been monitoring platform health, and they know they must complete a critical payment gateway upgrade.
And let me guess, the timing conflicts.
This upgrade has to happen before the upcoming holiday trading period, or the platform risks crashing under heavy traffic.
Yeah.
And here's the structural catch. Both of these initiatives require the exact same limited pool of specialist back-end engineers.
Okay, this is fascinating because this isn't a case of one side being wrong.
Not at all.
It's not just stubborn personalities clashing in a meeting room because someone didn't get enough sleep. We have a collision of completely legitimate outcomes.
Absolutely legitimate.
Marketing is absolutely right to push for the campaign. They are accountable for revenue. Engineering is absolutely right to push for the upgrade. They are accountable for operational stability.
And neither side can safely concede. They're both fiercely protecting the outcomes the organization has explicitly asked them to deliver.
They're just doing their jobs.
Exactly. Marketing looks at the delay and sees missed revenue and failed targets. Engineering looks at the delay and sees a catastrophic platform outage during the most important time of the year.
And this is the exact moment in the meeting where everyone just stares at each other, the energy completely drains from the room, and someone finally throws their hands up and says, "We can't solve this here. We need to escalate this to the VP or the executive board."
That is exactly what happens.
Yeah.
And when it lands on the executive board's desk, what do you think the executives usually think?
They probably think, why are these teams so difficult?
Yes. They look down and think, why are our teams so slow? Why can't these highly paid professionals just collaborate and figure this out locally? Why do they constantly need us to break ties?
But the executives are missing their own role in the bottleneck.
Entirely. The root cause of this latency isn't a failure of team collaboration. The root cause is an unclear strategic boundary.
The boundary wasn't set at the top.
Exactly. The organization as a whole, at the executive level, has not made it clear how short-term revenue growth should be balanced against long-term platform stability in this specific operating context.
Because the executives haven't made that overarching strategic trade-off, they have essentially exported the conflict down to the teams.
That's a great way to put it.
They've handed down two competing Priority 1 mandates and just expected the teams to magically resolve the physics of limited resources.
Yes. Because the strategic trade-off hasn't been made visible at the top, the team is forced to escalate to force the issue. The escalation is essentially the team saying, we don't have the authority to decide if the company values revenue or stability more today. You have to tell us.
Right. They need the business rule.
And once the executive is forced to define the boundary, let's say they confirm that avoiding a holiday crash is the absolute priority. The overarching risk is absorbed by leadership.
Because they made the call.
Right. And from there, a safer compromise can emerge locally.
Oh, I see.
Maybe marketing realizes they can do a slightly smaller static promotion that doesn't require those back-end engineers, allowing the gateway upgrade to proceed. But they could not invent that compromise safely until the boundary and the risks were made visible.
So the friction, the delay, the endless waiting in that room, none of that came from the team members lacking the skills or the desire to move fast. It came from the system around them failing to provide coherent trade-offs.
The strategy was vague, so the execution stalled.
Which means we can't fix this by sending the team to another Agile training seminar. We have to look beyond the team to the wider operating system of the company itself.
This is where we introduce the lens of the Harmony operating model.
The Harmony operating model.
Okay, yes, or TUM. We will use this to understand how individually reasonable mechanisms within an organization, things that seem perfectly logical on their own, how they combine to create a contradictory system that acts like a vacuum, just pulling all decisions upward.
Let's spend some real time here because this feels like the core of the issue. I want to break down these systemic mechanisms. How do these individual pieces, strategy, funding, governance, actually connect to create this friction?
Let's start with strategy and prioritization.
Okay, let's do it.
When we look at strategy, the friction usually occurs in one of two extremes. On one end, strategy functions as a detailed, step-by-step instruction manual rather than a directional constraint.
Like over-prescribing the solution.
Exactly. Leaders try to define exactly how a problem should be solved, rather than defining what the problem is and letting the team find the best path. This paralyzes teams, because the moment they encounter a reality that doesn't match the instruction manual, they have to stop.
And ask for a new manual.
Right. They have to ask for permission to deviate from the instructions.
And the other extreme, what's the opposite of the instruction manual?
The other extreme is the illusion of prioritization.
Oh, I like that phrase.
This is where leadership avoids making difficult trade-offs by labeling everything on the roadmap as priority 1.
If everything is priority 1, nothing is.
Exactly. If you have 10 initiatives and they are all P1, you have no strategy. You have a wish list.
Yeah.
And teams have no framework to resolve resource conflicts locally. So they escalate, just like the marketing and engineering scenario.
It's the executive avoidance of discomfort trickling down to become a team-level crisis.
That's very well said.
Okay, what about funding? I have to imagine how the money flows dictates almost everything about how a team behaves.
Funding is the loudest signal in any organization.
The loudest signal.
You can have the CEO stand on a stage at an all-hands meeting and passionately demand agile product adaptation and rapid learning and customer obsession.
Everyone cheers.
Right. But if that same organization funds its teams through rigid, stop-start project cycles with fixed scopes and rigid deadlines tied to annual budgets, the teams will optimize for the funding model, not the learning.
Because the funding model is what determines if they still have jobs next quarter.
Exactly.
Can you explain the mechanics of that? Like, how does that stop-start funding actually force permission seeking?
Imagine a team learns through early testing that their initial product idea is flawed.
Okay, so they need to pivot.
Right. To adapt, they need to change the scope.
Right.
But changing the scope means they have to halt work, write a new business case, go back to an investment board, and beg for their budget to be reapproved in a process that takes 2 months.
Huh.
What do you think they will do?
They are going to ignore the learning. They will just build the flawed product because it's already funded.
Exactly. They will deliver the flawed plan because the funding model penalizes adaptation. To survive, they seek permission at every gate, ensuring they are perfectly aligned with the original funded scope, regardless of whether it still makes sense.
Which flows right into governance, right? We talked about consultation morphing into approval earlier.
Yeah.
How does governance typically misbehave in this contradictory system?
Well, governance is absolutely critical for a healthy organization. The issue is how it behaves and when it occurs.
The timing.
Yes. When governance forms act as late-stage approval gates demanding absolute certainty, detailed ROI calculations, and exhaustive risk mitigation plans before any actual discovery or building has even happened, they create what Matt refers to as reassurance theater.
Reassurance theater, that is a brilliant term. If you've ever spent a Friday afternoon polishing a spreadsheet so that all the status indicators are green just to get a steering committee off your back, you have performed in reassurance theater.
We all have. Teams spend their time and cognitive energy polishing slides to look confident and certain for executives, rather than doing the messy, uncertain work of learning and exposing actual risk.
It's all about making the executives feel comfortable.
Right. Reassurance theater delays learning entirely because the goal of the meeting isn't to uncover truth, it's to present an illusion of control. And measurement ties directly into this as well.
Right, the metrics. What happens when the tools we use to measure success actually strip teams of their authority?
When metrics are used primarily as a form of judgment, for instance, comparing one team's velocity against another, or demanding that a team's status reports always show upward, linear progress, it drives defensive reporting.
So people start gaming the metrics.
They hide their struggles. They will artificially lower their targets so they could easily hit them.
Right, playing it safe.
Metrics in a healthy system should be used as feedback to guide learning and adjustment. When they are used as a surveillance tool to punish variance, teams will stop taking risk and start asking for permission for every move they make.
I understand how all these pieces of the operating system strategy, funding, governance, measurement, how they all combine to create this creeping bureaucratic slowness. But I have to push back a little on the reality of corporate life here.
Sure, go ahead.
All of this theoretical system design sounds logical when things are calm, but what happens when the pressure spikes? All of this gets 10 times worse when there's a crisis or a tight deadline, right? Doesn't the need for speed override all this systemic bureaucracy?
It's quite the opposite, actually, and it brings us to a crucial behavioral pattern in leaders known as the urgency reflex.
The urgency reflex.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have to look at how leaders react under immense pressure. When a crisis hits, maybe a competitor launches a rival product, or there's a macroeconomic shift, the urgency reflex kicks in, and leaders instinctively pull decisions upward.
So they centralize control.
They bypass the teams, they demand daily status updates, and they override local decisions in the name of speed and executive action.
Which, honestly, in the heat of the moment, that feels like strong leadership. It feels like they are taking charge and steering the ship through the storm.
It feels like taking charge to the leader, yes. But what it signals to the organization is devastating.
What does it signal?
It teaches the team that autonomy is a luxury. It teaches them that empowerment is a fair-weather concept only permitted during calm times when the stakes are low.
Wow. So the moment things get difficult, the mask slips, and the team realizes they never really had the keys to the car in the first place.
Exactly. And the long-term damage of that is profound. Once the crisis passes and things return to normal, that habit of waiting for permission has been cemented in the team's psychology.
Because they remember what happened last time.
Right. They have learned that their authority is easily revoked, so they preemptively wait for instructions the next time things get even slightly complex. The urgency reflex trains the organization to be passive.
That is heavy. So if the current operating system, with its rigid stop-start funding, its reassurance theater, its invisible boundaries, and this executive urgency reflex, if all of that is currently tuned to pull decisions upward, what does the inverse look like?
The healthy state.
Yeah, what does it actually look like when an organization tunes its system to push decisions down to where the work is happening?
That is the transition from empowerment theater to healthy empowerment. And healthy empowerment is defined fundamentally as usable authority operating inside clear, trusted, and visible boundaries.
So redefining the target state.
Exactly. It means that decisions are made as close to the work as possible by the people who hold the deepest and most current context about the customer and the technology.
So in this state, you actually have the off-road vehicle, you have the map, the headlights work, and management has clearly marked where the ravines are.
Exactly.
But how does that play out day to day? Because we established earlier that healthy autonomy doesn't mean a team just goes into a cave and builds whatever they want in isolation.
Correct. Healthy autonomy requires intense, continuous collaboration, particularly with those enabling functions we discussed earlier: legal, finance, compliance, marketing.
But the timing changes, right?
The timing and the intent change completely. These functions are brought in early as co-creators to shape the value safely. They help build the guardrails so the team can move fast without breaking enterprise rules.
So legal is a partner in designing the architecture of the feature rather than a roadblock the day before the launch date.
Yes. And healthy empowerment inherently embraces learning loops. It means that the system is designed to allow assumptions to be tested quickly.
Which reduces risk.
Massively. If the evidence shows a direction is wrong, the team can change direction without that pivot being framed organizationally as a failure. Risk awareness is actually much higher in a healthy system because risk is managed continuously through small, rapid experiments rather than being hidden behind false certainty and green status reports until it explodes at launch.
So in this ideal healthy state, does a team never escalate anything? Does the executive board just sit around drinking coffee because all the decisions are happening at the team level?
Not at all. Escalation still happens, and it is a vital part of a healthy system. But it transforms from being habitual to being intentional.
Intentional escalation.
Right. In empowerment theater, teams escalate because they're afraid or because boundaries are hidden. In a healthy system, teams escalate when a decision genuinely requires cross-portfolio alignment.
Like the marketing and engineering conflict.
Yes. Or when a decision crosses a known strategic boundary, or when it involves a level of enterprise risk that the team cannot and really should not absorb locally.
They aren't escalating because they are paralyzed. They're escalating because it's genuinely above their pay grade to make a structural trade-off for the entire enterprise.
Precisely. And in this state, governance transforms as well. It moves from being a control mechanism focused on audits and approvals into an enabler.
An enabler. What does enabling governance look like?
Governance forums exist to clarify decision rights, to make difficult strategic trade-offs visible, and to connect ongoing investment to actual validated outcomes, rather than just tracking project milestones.
And what about the leaders? We talked about the damage of the urgency reflex. How do leaders behave in a state of healthy empowerment, especially when things go wrong? Because in any complex environment, outcomes are imperfect. Experiments will fail.
Healthy empowerment requires a fundamental shift in leadership behavior. Leaders must respond to uncertainty and failure with curiosity, not control.
Curiosity, not control. That's a great mantra.
It is. When a decision yields an imperfect outcome or a well-designed experiment fails, leaders in a harmonized organization focus on what the system learned, not who is to blame. They actively protect psychological safety.
So they don't revert to the urgency reflex.
No. When the crisis hits, instead of centralizing control and demanding status updates, they ask, what context do you need for me to solve this? Or what did this outcome teach us about our assumptions? Rather than, who authorized this?
Okay, taking a step back, this is a massive paradigm shift. But getting to this state isn't about rolling out a massive new Agile framework, hiring a fleet of consultants, or buying a new project management software tool.
No, it's not about adding more tools.
It's about looking at the signals right in front of us and seeking coherence in the system.
If we connect all this back to the core philosophy of Matt's work, we see that harmony is not a rigid framework you install like an operating system update.
Right.
Harmony is a state of coherence. It is what happens when strategic intent, authority, boundaries, risk, funding models, governance structures, measurement, and leadership behavior all reinforce one another instead of pulling the organization in competing directions.
It's about making sure that the steering wheel, the gas pedal, and the map are all actually designed for the same vehicle and that the road you're on matches the vehicle you were given.
That's the perfect way to visualize it.
Which brings us directly to you listening to this right now. We want to move this from abstract theory into your day-to-day practice. Rather than feeling overwhelmed and trying to fix your entire corporate operating system tomorrow morning, you can start by looking for the small signals of friction.
You can observe the habits that have formed in your immediate environment.
Exactly. It starts by interrogating the friction. The next time you feel that latency, that pause where everyone is waiting for someone else to make a call, recognize it not as a personal failing of the people in the room, but as a diagnostic signal from the system itself.
Think about the invisible train tracks that are forcing your off-road vehicle to a halt.
What if the very tools you use to measure your team's success, the status reports, the utilization metrics, the strict roadmap milestones, are the exact mechanism stripping them of their authority? What decision does your team repeatedly ask permission to make, even though it already has the context and accountability to make it? What has the system taught them might happen if they decide without asking?
If this tension feels familiar, it is one of the signals harmony is designed to surface.
And remember to visit agileproducthub.com for more information, articles, podcasts, tools, and books from Matt.